The mountains of Kairavas had stood for millennia, their peaks piercing the clouds like ancient spears thrust into the sky. It was here, among the ice-carved valleys and wind-scoured cliffs, that the dragon pack known as the Crimson Wing made their ancestral home. For generations they had ruled these heights unchallenged, their scales gleaming like molten rubies against the eternal snow. But on this bitter morning, the mountains echoed not with roars of dominance, but with keening wails of loss. Matriarch Scoria's massive form trembled as she stood at the edge of the ravine, her wings tucked tight against her body. Below, barely visible through the swirling snow, lay the shattered remnants of the nesting cavern. An avalanche unprecedented in its violence had torn through the mountainside 3 days prior, burying the breeding chamber beneath tons of ice and rock. 2 hatchlings had been inside. Ember and Pyra, barely a month old, their wings still soft and ungainly. The pack had clawed at the rubble until their talons bled, had breathed fire until their throats burned raw. But the ice was too deep, the stone too heavy. Even dragons had their limits. The other pack members circled overhead, their mournful cries carrying for miles. Dragons did not weep as humans did, but the grief that rolled off them in waves was palpable, a psychic weight that pressed down on the mountains themselves. They had failed in the most fundamental duty of any species, to protect their young. Scoria raised her great head, preparing to sound the final dirge, the song that would mark the hatchlings as lost to memory and ash. Her jaws parted, and then she froze. A figure had emerged from the tree line far below, moving through the chest-deep snow with determined, inefficient steps. It was small, laughably so, wrapped in furs and fabric that did nothing to hide its fragility. A human, the pack hissed in unison. Humans were rare in these heights, and when they came, it was usually to hunt or to steal. Scoria's eyes narrowed, flames kindling in her throat. If this creature thought to scavenge from their tragedy, but the human wasn't approaching the ravine. It was moving parallel to it, trudging through the snow with what appeared to be some kind of metal contraption strapped to its back. As Scoria watched, the figure stopped, adjusted the device, and pressed something against the ice face. A sound echoed across the valley, not the roar of dragonfire, but something sharper, more controlled. A crack appeared in the ice. The human worked with single-minded focus, ignorant or indifferent to the dragons circling above. It placed small charges against the ice at precise intervals, then retreated before triggering them. Each explosion was carefully calibrated, breaking the ice without collapsing the entire face. It was methodical, intelligent. It was trying to reach the hatchlings. Scoria descended in a rush of wind and wings, landing 20 feet from the human with enough force to spray snow in all directions. The other dragons followed, forming a semicircle around the tiny figure. The human stumbled backward, fumbling with something at its belt, but didn't flee. Up close, Scoria could see more details. The human was male, his face weathered by wind and cold, his eyes a startling green against his frost-burned skin. He held no weapon, only a small device covered in buttons and lights. When he spoke, his voice was steady despite the fear that surely must have gripped him. "My name is Kallen," he said, his words translated by the device into the ancient draconic tongue. "I'm a rescue specialist. I tracked the avalanche signature from the valley. If your young are still alive, I can get them out." The pack erupted in hisses and growls. Dragons did not accept help, especially not from humans. They were the apex, the eternal flame, the masters of sky and stone. To admit they needed assistance from such a fragile, short-lived creature was unthinkable. But Scoria looked at the carefully placed charges at the precise cracks in the ice. She looked at the device on Callan's back, some kind of ground-penetrating sensor. She realized technology beyond what her kind possessed. She looked at the human's eyes and saw no greed there, no opportunism, only determination. "Why?" she rumbled, her voice like grinding stone. "Why would you risk yourself for our kind? We are not allies. We have killed your people. We would kill you now if we chose." Kalen met her gaze without flinching. "Because they're children," he said simply, "and because I've lost children too. No parent should have to bury their young if there's any chance at all that they might still live." There was a story there, Scoria knew, a wound that had never quite healed. She could smell the old grief on him, mixed with smoke and determination. This human had suffered. And rather than let that suffering turn him bitter, he had made it his purpose to prevent others from enduring the same. It was, she realized, the most dragon thing she had ever seen a human do. Show us, she commanded. Kalen nodded and activated his scanner. The device emitted a series of pings and a holographic display materialized in the air. Deep beneath the ice, perhaps 60 feet down, two small heat signatures flickered. Alive. Against all odds, the hatchlings were still alive. What followed was a display of human ingenuity that would be spoken of in dragon songs for generations. Kalen directed the pack to apply their fire at specific points while he set his charges at others, creating a controlled collapse that formed a tunnel rather than a catastrophe. He descended into the ice on ropes, his small frame able to navigate crevices that would have trapped even the smallest dragon. The pack worked alongside him, taking his directions without question. Scoria found herself grudgingly impressed by his efficiency, his calm under pressure, his refusal to waste energy on fear. He worked like a dragon worked, with absolute focus on the goal. 6 hours later, as the sun began to set, Kalen emerged from the tunnel with a bundle in his arms. Ember, barely conscious but alive, mewed weakly as Scoria took her precious daughter in her claws. Minutes later, the pack pulled Pyra from a second shaft, her wings torn but her eyes bright with that indomitable spark that defined dragonkind. The pack sang then, not in mourning but in joy, their voices shaking snow from the peaks for miles around. Kalen collapsed in the snow, exhausted, his lips blue with cold. Scoria curled her body around him, her natural heat keeping him from freezing as the others tended to the hatchlings. "You have given us a debt we can never repay, human," Scoria murmured. Kalen smiled weakly. "I don't want payment. I needed them to live. For their sake, for yours." He paused. "For mine." In the days that followed, as Kalen recovered in the warmth of the dragon caves, the pack learned his story. He had been a father once, before a winter storm had taken his own children. He couldn't save them, so he had devoted his life to saving others, regardless of species. When he finally prepared to leave, Scoria offered him something unprecedented, a scale from her own breast, a mark of honor never before given to a non-dragon. "You are pack now," she said. "If ever you have need, call us. We will come." Kalen accepted the scale with trembling hands, tears freezing on his cheeks. As he descended the mountain, Ember and Pyra watched from the cave mouth, already stronger, already healing. They would grow up knowing that sometimes the greatest strength came not from tooth and claw and flame, but from the stubborn refusal to accept loss. From the determination to save lives, even when hope seemed lost. They would grow up knowing that humanity, for all its fragility, possessed a different kind of fire, one that no amount of ice could ever extinguish.